Welcome to Eternal Elements Learning Podcast brought to you by Chess Online. These podcasts are a part of the audio certificate programs on Chess Online. You're free to take these podcasts on your desired portal also, should you only wish to learn on the go. Thank you so much for engaging on these podcasts, and you can connect with the author on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. Hi, this is Niket Karajagi from Eternal Elements, brought to you by Chess Online. We talk about strategy. We're discussing grand strategies. In my earlier podcast, I talked about horizontal acquisition. Mergers and acquisitions are a part of a regular process when it comes to corporate expansion plans. In the horizontal acquisition, we talked about it being a grand strategy which accomplishes growth by acquiring similar firms which are at the same stage of production and marketing chain. They may be operating in the same market for sure. They're in the same product that they're into. We will, in this podcast, talk about our sixth grand strategy, which is vertical acquisition. Vertical acquisition plays a very, very important role in the firm's expansion plans. And typically in the volatile world that we live in, which has a fast-paced technological disruptions happening, we don't have much time for research and development, for creating innovations. And we discussed in the grand strategy of innovation that the probability of a failure of innovation is very high. We also discussed the idea of core competence. Therefore, a vertical acquisition is a much sophisticated grand strategy that organizations deploy for their expansion plans. Now, what is vertical acquisition? It's a grand strategy where the firm looks at acquiring other firms which are either on the input side of the value chain or they're on the customer or the demand side of the value chain. So let's talk about it a little more. It acquires firms that supplies it with inputs, or it can acquire firms which cater to customers, which are its own customers, or it might want to capture new customers. The whole idea here is to either expand on the core competencies and the technology, or get into the market and acquire customers who are already available. Let's talk about a few scenarios here. Let's look at the input side of the supply chain. Let's look at the input side of probably the business value chain. In today's world, a lot of organizations are acquiring firms, and typically in technology field, they're acquiring firms which specialize in particular softwares or a particular kind of a technology. For instance, in the mobile phone, if I want to create a high security mechanism for my phone in terms of the recognition of my face or the recognition of my eyeballs, iris, I would look at a firm which has invested a lot in the area and then acquire it. If I'm an automotive company and if I'm dependent on a particular critical raw material, which is very difficult to get, and if the demand is not controlled, it could severely affect my production cycle. What I would then do is I would acquire that firm which has already developed the core competence in that area. For instance, let's say it would make sense for me if a particular engine is extremely critical for me, or maybe a particular component of an engine is extremely critical for me. Rather than developing it, I would rather go out into the market and acquire a firm which is adept at it. On the demand side or on the customer side, I could even go for acquisitions. For instance, I worked for a logistics company as a consultant and I was a coach there. They acquired a whole lot of warehouses in the country. And now why did they do that? One, there was a company which was already into warehousing and they had created a whole lot of warehouses or a network of warehouses across the country. Number two, they had their own customers. Now this was typically a company which was into ocean freight, surface, and air freight. Now, they didn't have warehouses, so what they would do is they would primarily pick up deals and value-added services where they would go for warehouses which are not theirs. Now what they did was, since the business was doing extremely well, rather than creating their own network, they went and just bought it out. Beverage companies tend to acquire bottling plants. And why do they do that? Rather than creating your own bottling plant, you already have the technology, the infrastructure, the people, so all the factors of production are already available, and all you have to do is just go acquire that bottling firm. You have your own formula, you have the bottling firm, and you then create your own distribution channel, because the distribution channel probably already exists, or you may even decide to acquire the distribution channel, whichever way you want to go for it. Therefore, if horizontal acquisition is about acquiring firms which are similar to you in terms of your product and market, vertical acquisition is about acquisition of firms which cater to your business value chain, either on the input side or on the customer or the demand side. It is a fast way of growing. It's also a very fast way of acquiring the competencies. The only problem would be the cultural integration, because they come from a different product line. They come with a different mindset, and therefore a lot of time may have to be spent in terms of integrating the managerial and the leadership competencies and the core values and the culture of the organization with the company that's acquired. But that's typically true even in the case of horizontal acquisition, because each company has its own culture. There are a lot of examples in the market. There are definitely inherent risks associated with both the types of acquisitions. In the case of horizontally acquired firms, there's a risk which is about increased commitment to the type of business that you have acquired. And for a vertically acquired firm, the risk results from the firm's expansion plan requiring strategic managers to broaden the base of their competencies, because what's happening at the corporate level is you're getting into areas which you've never really looked at before, and they are completely diverse from the core competence that you already have. But whoever said that business doesn't come with a risk? And there has to be a risk appetite for sure when you're going in for these acquisitions. So thank you very much. This is Niket Karajagi signing off from Eternal Elements, brought to you by Tessa Online. I'm talking about strategy. I'm talking about strategies that are today being implemented in the international world. And I'm sure they will value add to you when you're at work. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next podcast, where I'm going to talk about the 8th grand strategy of the conglomerate diversification. See you soon.